How's it going? All right, welcome to the PAWSA tutorial. Now, I want to start out with kind of an overview, a kind of roadmap of what's going to happen here. Trying to be a little bit more streamlined than the last tutorials. The last tutorials just kind of talked as I went, but I'm going to try to give a little bit more of a roadmap here. So first thing we're going to do is build the groove. Now, I try to work as fast as I can towards writing the bass line because for me, it's really all about getting that low end groove right and then finding the right hooks to sit on top of it. So it's just getting that low end groove and then finding the hooks. And those are the most important kind of elements. So I want to work as fast as I can towards getting that low end groove. And so that means starting with a basic beat, which is kick, clap, and open hat, finding some kind of syncopated rhythmical thing like a percussion loop or something. And the reason why I want to get some kind of syncopated thing, and syncopated has to do with kind of like an interesting rhythm. You could think of it now. We'll get into it later. But I just want something to vibe off of for when I write the bass line. So basic beat, some kind of syncopated element, and then I'll get into writing the bass line. Doing the bass sound design, writing the bass line. And then I'll spend a lot of time there because I want that to be right. That's the foundation of the track. The basic beat, kind of the syncopated kind of motif, percussion motif kind of thing, and then the bass line. Then after we build the groove, that's the groove, we're going to get into working on the climax of the track. And that's basically where all the good stuff happens, right? So brainstorming hook ideas, maybe some vocals, maybe a synth, maybe chords, melodies, all that good stuff. That goes into just brainstorming ideas for the climax, finding the hooks. And so the first two stages here of this are the two most important things really for a track, which is developing that groove, especially the low end groove, and then focusing on getting the right hooks. If you get both of those foundational elements right, then you're going to have a pretty good track. So after the climax, the next thing I'm going to do is work out into the main break. And that's where, of course, you'll do the risers, you'll build the tension, snare rolls, all that good stuff, vocal repetition, blah, 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 blah. And so after I get the main break idea down, what I want to do is cycle between the climax and the main break. Just cycle and cycle and cycle and make sure that those two sections cycle well, because that's like the meat of the track. That's why people buy the track, is you need to build the right amount of tension and then release that going into the drop. That's what everybody's waiting for. So you need to make sure that that cycles well, so you know that you're building the right amount of attention. It's interesting, it's fun, if that's the style that you're going for, and then you just drop into the drop, obviously, and hopefully it has the right impact that you want. And so that's kind of what I'm checking there, is making sure that the main break and the climax of the track cycle well. Everything's exciting. The tension is built. The tension is released. And then after that cycles well, it's pretty much smooth sailing. Kind of. Not really, though, because then you just flesh out the rest of the track, kind of just, I'm obviously going to be working off of a PAWSA track, so, but maybe you have experience arranging, or maybe you don't, so you want to use a reference track. Maybe you're going to build a PAWSA style track, so you can use one of his. But what you do is you just kind of flesh out the rest of the track. So you have the intro, maybe you have like the intro drop, you have your first break, then you have your first kind of climactic drop, then you have your main break, your next climactic drop. The structure of the song is pretty straightforward for the most part in Tech House, so you don't have to go crazy there. So fleshing out the rest of the track, finishing the arrangement, and then the last stage is the flow stage. The flow stage is where you listen to the track over and over and over and just get the nuances, get the details dialed in, fine-tune everything, refine the track, and just make sure that the flow of energy over time is right. It feels you're building up the right amount of tension, you're releasing the right amount of tension just over time across the entire course of the track. And so what I like to do a lot of the times is export the track, go for a walk, take notes in a Google Doc on what I need to change, and then come back and just make the changes and do that over and over and over until the track gets to the level that I want it to be. And so that's what we're going to be looking at in this tutorial, going through those 5 steps. So again, really quick, just to summarize, we're going to be building the groove, building a climax, building the main break, finishing the arrangement, and then going through that flow stage. All right, so first thing is the reference. I'm going to use PAWSA's track Work as a reference. I listen to a lot of his tracks, and I just think this one in particular really kind of captures a lot of different aspects of his sound. And so this is the one that I'm going to use. Now, first thing I need to do is just make sure that we're all in time here. I'm just going to zoom in and cut to the transient, move this over here, and then I just need to zoom back out. And just to let you know, this is not warped here, it's just clean. And so I'm going to zoom out and just change the BPM here until we get these guys onto the grid. So 127 it looks like, and there we go, we're good to go. So first things first, after this now, we have to get the basic beat going, and that's gonna be the kick, clap, and open hat, the foundation of the track. Now, I'm not actually gonna play PAWSA's track just to stay clear of copyright issues. Now, I'm definitely gonna have to use some vocal samples later on, but whatever. I'm just gonna try to stay as clean as I can here. And so, but you probably know PAWSA's sound, right? It's beefy, for lack of a better word, maybe analog. I imagine like tubes and tape distortion, saturation, just gritty and beefy. And so the first thing I need to do is find samples that kind of fit that vibe. Now, there's actually two criteria that I look for. Number one, I just mentioned it. The samples have to fit the vibe. They don't have to be exactly like the sounds that PAWSA is using, but they have to fit the vibe. And the second criteria is I have to like the samples, right? I have to like the kick, clap, and open hat samples that I choose. That's the whole point. And so I'm going to hit Shift-Command-T to create a new MIDI track here. I'm going to drag a drum rack on here, and this is how I'm going to do this. Basically, I'm just going to fill out this little group of pads here in the drum rack with 16 kicks. Then I'm going to lift this guy up, and I'm going to fill out this next group of pads with 16 claps. I'm going to leap up and fill this next group of 16 pads with hats. If this is your first time doing something like this, I highly recommend looping around the section, especially in the intro where there's not a lot of distracting sounds. Turning the reference down by like -12 and then selecting the samples in the context of the track, because then you can really get a feel if it fits the vibe. And as you get faster, you don't have to really reference it. You could just quickly hear what the vibe is, and then you could just kind of scroll through real quick. Something like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through, I'm going to find some samples and see if they work. So let's get started here. Okay, so it's a little too much going on. PAWSA's sound is a little more simple than that. That's nice actually, but those are both actually pretty cool. I'm going to drag this one in. It's a little bit deeper. Let's see what else. All too much attack on these guys, you know, like these are sampled kicks, so you have sometimes a hi-hat or a shaker in there. That's kind of beefy, right? That's pretty beefy. So I'm gonna throw that in. It's a little more complex than a typical PAWSA sound, but whatever. And let's see. Too clean, right? So. That's a winner, so that's pretty good. I'm gonna throw it in there. But basically, you get the idea. I'm just gonna keep on filling this drum rack up with kicks, and I'm gonna move over here. I'm gonna fill this up with claps. I'm gonna come over here and fill this up with open hats, and I will see you on the other side. So all we gotta do, let's create a MIDI clip, and you'll see here, we got all these lovely samples to go through. So I'm just gonna change this to quarter notes here, and we're just gonna zoom in, just maybe actually go over smaller region here, 1 bar. I'm just going to hold B and I'm going to click and drag up to make sure that the sample is at full velocity. I'm just going to drag over to the right, and there we go. So let's just try to find a kick that sounds pretty good. All right, so that one's not that bad. I'm going to mute it by hitting 0 and just copy this up here. Hit 0 again. Check out the next one. So definitely not. That one's not that bad either, so I'm going to, again, mute these, copy up the next one. Here we go. That one doesn't quite have enough punch to it. A little too much front end there. Not long enough. Weird stuff going on the back. All right, so this one's definitely beefy, so I'm going to save this one, and let's just keep on going here. That one's really nice. So you get the point, right? Okay. Actually, I like that one better. So I'm going to click on this key right here and delete that. And let's see if we can keep going here. And so these are all the kicks that I like. And so what I want to do is just see which one I like the best. So that one's pretty good. Let's check this one out. So I like that first one better than that one. So what about this? That's got a really nice punch to it. So I'm going to keep that guy. Now, that one's okay, but I like this one better. So now, and then so I'm going to delete that one. What about this guy? And so that one's not even close to as beefy as this guy. So that's really cool. And what about this guy? So two different styles. I like them both. Both are super beefy. So I'm going to hold off on that. Let's actually find the other samples and see if they can kind of help us decide here. So let's start checking out some claps. Whoops, and we need to put the claps on the weak beats. Okay, weak beats are the second and fourth beat in a bar. And so let's just go ahead and bring this guy up. Let's check these out. So definitely gonna keep that one. That's a great clap right there. And what about this? I actually kind of like that one too, even though it's a little bit bright. It could give a little bit of smack to the sounds. So that'd be a nice little pre-clap. And so that could actually serve as a nice kind of ambiance in the background. You know, taking out the transient, but using it almost as a reverb. We already have a pre-clap that I like better than that. That one's kind of nice. I like that one. That one's pretty nice too. See, that's the problem is you get all these samples that you like and now you have trouble figuring out which ones you want to keep. Ah, shit, that one's good too. Fuck. All right. See, this is what happens. This is why sometimes I'll move them over to the right and then slide them over because Ableton doesn't want to lock them on sometimes. Okay, so definitely not that one. So let's try these guys. So those two actually go really well together. Let's see if we can add some layers onto those. So if I take this one away, kind of adds a little bit of a front. There's a -6 milliseconds here, which tells you that you actually need to move the sample a little forward. So let's actually go ahead and do that a little bit. So I'm going to slide in a narrow here, zoom in. And these guys, move this forward a little bit. So it sounds kind of nice with a little kind of pre-clap thing there. And so then what else is going on? Okay, all right, what about this? So this one's a little bit of a lower clap up here. No, definitely not. What is this? No, get rid of that guy. Wait, no, oh, that's our pre-clap. My bad. Okay, so what about this? Okay, I don't like that. What about this guy? I don't like that either. Okay. That's okay, but I think this one's better. Yeah, by a million times. So, and I think if I shorten the decay on this guy, we can get a cool ambience from it. So let's try switching up the kicks really quick. But this is literally the process. So now that kick feels a little too long, this one feels nice and kind of punchy. A little more along the vibe that I'm going for. So that's cool. Now, of course, what we have next is the open hat. So I'm going to change this to the 8th notes because the open hats are played on the off beat. And so right here, okay, there we go. And then we'll just do the exact same thing. So here we go. That's not punchy enough. That's too weak. That's not bad. Not quite bright enough, but I'm going to keep it. Same kind of problem, so if one works, the other one's going to work maybe. A little too weak, but I like the shortness. A little too harsh. That's got a nice little ambience to it, so I'm going to keep that guy. See, again, it's hard to sometimes... There we go. Ooh, I like that one. Okay, here we go. Oh, that's pretty good. Let's pretty much the same thing. That guy's a little bit shorter. Shorter is nice sometimes because then there's a little bit more of a gap between the hits. And so it creates a little bit more of a vibe for me. Okay, cool. So moving on here. Whoops. So here we go. That texture is sweet, so I'm going to keep that guy. I could use that as a really cool kind of lift somewhere, but something I like about that one, even though it's a little kind of left field. Ooh, that's really nice. All right, so this one was really good. And those really go well together. Just a little bit of tweaking, maybe you can get them really nice. That one doesn't really add that much. You just get a little bit of a tail. But it's not that interesting of a tail, so. That scratchy texture is really cool. Just really lifts the energy. What about this guy? Ooh, that one's kind of cool, though. A little too, actually, it has too much like of a pitch to it. This one's really nice, though. So what if I took this one out? Ah, I see. Cool. And so the next thing is to just export all of these. So let's see how many sounds. I'm just going to look over here on the left to see how many sounds are playing. So we have one kick. Looks like we have 4 claps and 3. So 8. I think that's 8, right? 1 plus 3 plus 4 or something like that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm creating 8 MIDI clips. And the great thing about Ableton is that when I drag these outside of this drum rack and drop them onto this new MIDI track, it's going to copy over the drum rack and the MIDI. So really convenient. So let's check this out. So we need to drag this guy. So let's go ahead and move him. I'm just going to option drag. And there you go. As you can see, this drum rack now has the MIDI right here, or the sample, obviously. And then it also has the MIDI ready to go. So that's cool. And then let's see. Let's go ahead and figure out what else. So all these guys. And so you get it. I'm just going to drag and export all these and put them on their own channel so that we can have control over each individual sound. Exported all of the samples. Here they are. I've named them just kind of according to their name and their sound. And what I recommend doing now is saving the drum rack. So just click on the save button and then name it whatever you want. So I like to just put my initials and then, work maybe, and then drum rack. There you go. And just save it. Now, this is cool if you're studying a sound or if you're trying to develop a sound and you find a track that's kind of close, like it's worth it going through this exercise, saving the drum rack, because those drum racks can always be updated and refined. So over time, you can end up developing a couple drum racks that just nail the kind of sound that you're after for any given project. So we found these sounds. After so many different possibilities, we came to these, and now what I want to do is try to make them work a little bit better. And so there's a couple layers of claps, there's a couple layers of hats, and the question is, what does each sound bring to the table? And I want to bring that out, and there's 2 ways to bring it out, right? We can bring the good stuff forward. Then if there's another sound that's interfering with the goodness of another sound, we can remove it so we can eliminate what's kind of interfering, or masking sometimes it's called. And so it's just kind of listening and seeing what each one brings to the table. So let's listen to the kick and see what we could do here. One thing that's kind of guiding the vision is like just getting beefy samples, just making them sound a little bit beefier. So let's check this out. Now, there's some potential there. Now, one thing I definitely want to do right away is go get the sausage fattener. Now, this is a little trick I like to do. Just turn the gain all the way down and the fatness all the way up, okay? Now, check this out. Okay, it's a little bit louder, so let's go ahead and level match it. So I'm going to get a utility plugin here, and then just bring it down a little bit. So instantly it's beefier, and it's actually quieter. Check this out. So if I turn the plugins off here, you'll see that the peak value, -1.74. Now if I turn these plugins on, -2.1. So it's actually quieter, but it's quieter from a peak level perspective, but it actually increases the perceived loudness. And most importantly though, it just increases the beefiness, right? Where's the beef? So that's cool. Another thing I want to do is kind of bring up the bottom end of the kick and take away a little bit of the top. And so Pro Q2, that'll be kind of my EQ of choice right here. I really like Ableton's EQ, but for whatever reason, I'm feeling this right now. So let's go ahead and just find something to boost kind of in the low end. Sounds pretty good right there. So let's bring this back a little bit. It's nice and punchy. So turning this off. Cool. Cool. And then just to, let's go ahead and bring some of this top end down too. So I'm just going to get a shelf here. So change this to high shelf. And let's go ahead. What I'm going to do is I'm going to boost this pretty high. Let's change this view here to 30 dB. I'm going to boost this pretty high. I'm going to find the frequencies that I kind of want to cut actually by boosting them. So let's see. So taking this away. All right, and one more thing. Let's see if we can actually boost a little. It's a little bit dull. I want to just remove some of those, but that's a little too much. So I'm going to come back to a high shelf. I'm actually boost the very top here. So I'm just going to push this all the way up. All right, I'm bypassed. Cool. And then one more thing, actually, I want to actually make this a mono kick. And the way I'm going to do that is just cut all the side information. So as you can see, I changed this channel mode to mid-side, and I have this band only selected on side. This is going to affect stereo. This would affect the middle channel. But here I'm only going to select the side. I'm just going to drag this all the way up, and there we go. All right, so before all this, and so before and after this stuff, much beefier. Now, I really like that back end of the kick. So what I want to do is actually bring that up with the transient designer. So if we come over here, I made a little Ableton rack of Native Instruments transient designer. And the reason why I made a rack of this is because I hate the way these knobs turn. And even when I hold down like shift or command, which usually lets you move in fine resolution, is just annoying. But Ableton's little knobs here are a dream because I can hold down command, and I can just move this in fine resolution. I can also just use my arrow keys on the keyboard to move up and down, and that's awesome. That lets you be really precise. What I want to do is just kind of boost this up a little bit here. So let's check this out. So in extreme form, it would sound like this. I want to boost the sustain. So if I take it away, you could hear that it just makes it really short and punchy. But I actually want to give it a little bit more beef on that back end. And finally, I know we're pushing the level a little bit, so I'm going to clip the output here. And I'm also just going to drive a little bit. Sounds a little too crunchy, so one thing I'm going to do is pull down on the bass here. And let's try. So that sounds pretty good. So before... Kick sounds good. Let's get the claps involved now. So I think the boxy clap is the main clap. It just has the right tone. And then here's the crisp clap. A little too weak. That's more of a transient. And so that brings us to the question, what do each of these claps bring to the table? And let's try to bring out the good stuff and then take out any kind of conflict that exists between them. And so with the boxy clap, obviously the tone is what's really nice about this. All right, so I might want to shape that a little bit with an EQ. And then with the crisp clap here, turn this guy off really quick. With the crisp clap, this is really, it's got a nice transient on it. So to let that transient through a little bit, what I could do is come over to this clap right here, the boxy clap, and change this to the classical mode so I can have control over the knobs of the envelope here, the amplitude envelope. You can also come over to controls here, click on amplitude, and you can have the visual kind of representation of the amplitude envelope. So what we can do is just bring this back a little bit. I'm going to start with 30 milliseconds. That's a good kind of starting point. It brings it back about a 64th note, which gives enough room for that kind of crisp clap to kind of cut through really quickly. But just to solo this, let me show this to you really quick. So if I have this at 0, here it just kind of swoops in. It just gives it a little bit extra room for this crisp clap to come in. All right, another thing I want to do is kind of bring down the sustain so that I can use the decay parameter here to control the length of these samples. Now I want to use the kick here to kind of serve as the basis point for the reference for how long this is. But typically 1 second is a nice length here. I don't feel the need to change that at all. I'm going to do the same thing over here as well with the crisp clap. Change this to the classic mode, bring the sustain down, and we're going to change this to 1000. So right away, those two, even when we're just adjusting the amplitude envelopes, they start to sound a lot better. And then what we can do is bring in this pre-clap, which adds a little bit of top, and then also the tail, which adds a little bit of ambience. So you can imagine with this guy, he's going to probably be a little bit shorter. He's also the pre-clap, right? So he's a little bit nudged forward here in the MIDI when we zoom way in, just a little tiny bit nudged forward. And so he doesn't need to be that long. So what I'm going to do is, let's just listen though. So let's just go ahead and change this again to classic mode. I'm going to bring sustain all the way down. I don't know why release is on 60 seconds. I'm going to change that on this too. Doesn't really matter though, because we brought the sustain all the way down. It just really kind of annoys me. There we go. All right, and so right around there. I'm just going to make this a nice even number because of my OCD, but... And then finally, let's get this tail going here. Okay, this one needs a lot of help. All right, so first thing I want to do is, again, let's change it to classical mode. We're definitely going to be pulling back the attack on here. And I'm just going to take the kick out because I want to see if I can get the tail to sound natural. Have a final, like, let's start kind of way back and I'll bring the attack in and we can find a nice spot where it kind of like rests. All right, around 120. Okay, that's about a 16th note and a delayed. That's interesting. Cool. We'll bring the sustain down, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get the decay time right. And if you hold down Shift and press up and down on the keyboards, you can move in really fine resolution here. So that's not bad. So what we've done is we've just kind of adjusted the amplitude envelope. That's all we've done with these sounds. And to me, they sound a lot better. Together, at least. Now, of course, what we could do is start using processing to fine-tune them even more. So I just got to listen, and the first thing that sticks out to me is the tail, the clap tail. What I want to do with that is bring out the tail a little bit more, but also kind of control the back end of it. And so what I'm hearing is I have this little rack here, the upwards single band compressor in Ableton's multi-band dynamics. And basically what this is just an upward compressor. Okay, because what I've done is I've turned off the high band and the low band. The only one that's on is the mid band, going from 30 hertz up to 15K. So I'm really trying to just get the entire spectrum. So this is just almost like a wide band upward compressor. Okay, but it also lets me get narrow if I need to. All right, and so as you could see, if I come to the above compression settings, everything's turned off, and then this is just zeroed out, okay? So it's not doing anything, it's not pushing, there's thresholds at 0, and there's also a 1-to-1 ratio, so nothing's going on. When we come to the below settings, which is the upward compression, it's way down here, okay? So it just lets me kind of bring this up to get that upwards compression. Now, what is an upwards compressor? Well, typically you think of compression as turning down loud signals, right? So if a sound passes the threshold, the compressor, a standard compressor or standard downward compressor, is going to turn the sound down, okay? If a sound goes above a threshold, the downwards compressor pushes that sound down. Upwards compressor is almost the opposite. If a sound falls below a certain threshold, the upwards compressor is going to push that sound upward, okay? And so that's how you can really create sausage sounds. It's because you have a compressor pushing downwards, and you can also have a compressor pushing upwards, okay, when it goes below. So you get this really thick signal. Yeah, but what I'm using this for here is really just to push up the back end of this, okay? I can't really do that using any of these parameters. I can't really push the back end of the sound up, okay? But you can see that this sound decays in volume, and so what I could do is use this upward compressor after it decays to a certain amount to push the volume back up, and so thereby I'm increasing kind of the ambience. So I hope that makes sense, but maybe in practice it'll make more sense. So what I want to do first is find the frequencies that I actually want to apply the upwards compression to. So let's check this out. Right now it's getting pretty much everything. So let's bring down some of that top end. Looks like it's just going to be the standard mid-range, about 500 to about 5K. That's nice. And then what I can do is just bring this guy up. I'm actually going to make this ratio a little bit more gentle. I'm going to hit delete, and then I'm going to just push it up once. So just a slight little, there we go, something like this. So you can see as I push the threshold way up, okay, it's actually bringing that back end of the clap way up. So without this, then with it, it just brings forward that mid-range ambience, which is exactly what I want from this sample. That's why I chose it, okay? So next thing I want to do though is maybe just do a little bit of EQ and just take out a little bit of the lows. Just gonna do a seat filter because we really don't need those lows. Just gonna bring this down. So finally, what I want to do is just control the length of the sample. And so I'm just going to come over to the LFO tool, and I have a little rack of all these different things. So I'm going to look for a kick gate here. Now, what this is, again, it's just a little rack that I created with just one macro here for the depth of the LFO tool, but that's not even important. All I want to do is kind of just shape this in a convenient way. So we might as well take the attack away, okay, right? Because we took it away over here, but just to make it really clean, we'll take it away with the LFO tool. Then it's a matter of, well, how long do we want the clap sample here? So something like that, right? So I'm just literally drawing in the dynamics of the sound or kind of reshaping them. So I like the tail, but the thing I'm missing right now is the clap air. So if I take the clap tail out, and then the air out, I'm kind of missing the clap air. And so what I want to do is something similar, actually. I want to see if I could use upward compression a little bit higher up in the clap air. So I'm gonna come up to the highest value here, 15K. Maybe we'll go a little bit higher, like 3K or something like that. Let's check this out. Solo it just to see what we're working with. A little too thin. Okay, 2K. And then let's lift this guy up a little bit, just to extend the sound a little bit longer. Maybe a little bit higher here too. So it just brings it up. I like that little kind of click on the back too. That's cool. Okay, so, and then an EQ definitely, because if I bring the solo out, we're gonna get that kind of mud in the bottom, but we already have that kind of deeper clap with the boxy clap, which we're gonna get to. But what I wanna do is same kind of thing here. Let's just kind of find a nice spot. Oh, whoops, let's turn this on. Maybe with the tail here. And then with the crisp clap, let's see what we can do here. Okay, definitely some EQ here. And again, I'm going to get that harsher filter, maybe bring this to 0.5, just because actually this, it doesn't really show it, it doesn't really represent this very well, but when you have that kind of steep of a cutoff, it actually is more like a boost. It actually boosts that frequency. And so that's why a lot of the times you'll see me bring the Q down, because it prevents it from kind of boosting and resonating at that cutoff. So that's why you'll see me do that a lot. So let's bring this down, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and let's listen in context a little bit more. And actually, what we really need to do is listen with the boxy sound, the boxy clap. Right around there sounds pretty good. Maybe we can give it a little tiny lift here. Let's try to find another. That's a nice kind of area right there. Gives it a nice little top there. And then finally, let's check this out with everything else. And then with this guy, what we could do is... So I want to see how much I can cut and get away with it before it sounds like I'm gutting the sound too much. Now this is playing over a kick, so I really don't need that much low end. I'm starting to cut away from the tone of the clap right here, so I don't want to go too high. That sounds pretty good. And then if we bring in the crisp clap, we could probably take some away up here. So let's see. And I'm taking this away from the boxy clap, so it'll sound like this. Just taking some of that top away to make room for the crisp clap. So check this out. Cool. All right, and then together here. Now I know this looks like mixing, and to some degree, of course it is. I'm not just using compression, I'm using upwards compression, I'm doing EQ and stuff, but I really want to get these fundamental elements sounding right together. Okay, so it's almost like sound design, like taking all these clap layers, extracting the best bits out of it, making sure they're not fighting with each other so they kind of glue together as this one sound that works. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the hats. So... So I definitely want to pay attention to the 909 that's top right now. The crush is kind of this textural thing, so I'm going to leave it for a second. And so with the hat 909, let's see. So one thing I definitely want to do is shorten it a little bit. Not sure there's anything else I need to do because I want to hear how the top adds to it. The top is definitely going to bring a little sparkle. So pretty much now the 909 is gone. Okay, so definitely what we need to do is let the 909 take the transient and let the top kind of take the sustain. And so I'm going to change this to classic, and then I'm going to bring this back. Let's bring the hi-hat up a little bit too. Cool, and then let's change this. And what I want to do is bring the sustain down. Let's try to get a good decay time for this guy. But what if we bring a little bit of the back end up a little bit? Let me show you what this looks like over here. So on the amplitude envelope, so right now it's just, we're bringing the volume in, then we're cutting it away. So now I'm just wondering, what if we bring in a little bit of the volume back here? Or let's kind of take it away, actually. Also, let's see if we can make this a mono sound, because then we can really actually kind of make it sound exactly like the Hat 909. Now, if you zoom in here to the Hat 909, you see it's a mono signal because there's only one waveform. If we zoom into the Hat top right here, you'll see that there's two waveforms right there. You see that? That's because it's a stereo sound. That's the left and the right. But the Hat, since it's a mono sound, the left and the right are exactly the same waveform. And so it's only going to display or look like there's only one waveform to display. So what I want to do, though, is to really kind of glue these together even more, is make the top hat mono. So basically that boils down to, am I going to choose the left or the right side? So let's just see which one sounds better. And they will sound slightly different. Now the right side sounds a little bit darker to me. Left side sounds better, so we got a winner there. And then, of course, the 909 hat has a lot of beefiness to it, which is good. That's probably why I selected it. But let's take out some of the beefiness from this sample so that, we can let the 909 hat shine. Cool, like something like that. And finally, we have this little hat crushed. Now that's a really cool sound. I actually like that it's stereo because these two are mono, and so this one will add a nice kind of wide grit to it. But we really have to bring that out. But so one of the first things I want to do might be kind of weird, but actually first things is let's get it out of the way. Let's increase the attack a little bit because you can see that this guy's what we really like is the back end texture, and this is kind of unnecessary. So let's bring this back. There we go, 30 milliseconds. And then I want to experiment with something. I'm going to use a utility plugin to make the sound mono, and then I'm going to use another plugin kind of chain that I created to make it wide. It just has a little bit more control for me over the width. So let's see which one. For whatever reason, the right stands out, so we're going to go with that. And then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to come over to Audio Effects, and I'm going to type in offset, because I created this little thing called offset delay complex. And what this is basically a doubler. Okay, so what's going on here is I have a dry and I have this offset channel. This offset channel is just simple delay linked. The left and right channels are linked with a delay of 15 milliseconds. So this offset is just delayed by 15 millisecond from the dry channel. Also on the dry channel, I've added a frequency shifter that's boosting it by 10 hertz here in the fine section. That's it. And then the opposite is happening here in the frequency shifter. We're going down -10, okay? And so this one is delayed. It is also pitched slightly differently. I mean, shifted, I guess, technically. And then the dry is shifted a little bit up. Okay, so these are going to sound different. Okay, now this one, let's hard pan this to the left, and we're going to hard pan this to the right. So check this out. So very wide sound. So if I just play the original sample, and now with my widening, much wider, very wide, right? It's about as wide as you can get it. And so to get all of them together, getting a really nice strong center channel with a really cool crush sound on the sides. And I think the only thing we need to do here is just add an EQ just to make sure that nothing's getting crazy on the sides. Okay, we'll just go up to like 500. Just to be safe. Okay, so all together then, probably turn this down a little bit. Still, the hat crush is still getting a little bit in the way, so what I want to do is use the LFO tool to kind of get that out of the way. So again, Audio Effects Rack, I'm just going to click and type in LFO. Now what I have is what I call a hat sidechain right here. And it's exactly what you think. It's like a sidechain for the open hat on the offbeat, which is exactly what it looks like right here. So this is a volume envelope, much in the same way that right here we have a volume envelope, okay? But this just gives you way more control over, because you could just draw knobs all day, nodes all day. And so here what I want to do is take a little bit of away from that, because we couldn't quite get it with the attack here. Let's see. Maybe 60 milliseconds will do right there too. But even still, okay, this is just such a precise way of doing things. So we're going to go ahead and stick with this, because I want that transient to come through the middle and then have that little texture on the back end of the hat. And so all together we have this. And I think that's a pretty good starting point. It reminds me of the PAWSA vibe. It's straightforward, it's beefy. And so that's a good starting point for the basic beat, which is the first step in creating the groove. The next, we're going to try to find some kind of syncopated element, and then we're going to get to writing the bass line as soon as we can to get that low-end groove nailed so that we can start finding some hooks and getting the cool shit together.